This is Podco Media Networks.
On episode 76 of Confessions of a Marketer, we're investigating what the Google Algo update means to marketers. Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. Taylor Ryan is in to talk about some of the changes in the Google algorithm. We'll get to that in a moment. Next time, Victor Machado of Post and Wall will be here to continue the theme we started in this episode as we go a bit deeper on SEO versus SEM. And later on, we'll have a couple of episodes with Rob Whedon of Deal Signal and Jeremy Middleton of Primata to discuss data intent and marketing. Prism HR CMO Scott Horn will be here to tell us what it's like to market a high-growth company. Later on in July, Angel Hollis-Vaccaro of Deloitte will be here to discuss the Deloitte report, Beyond Marketing, Experience Reimagined. Plus, we've got AJ Wilcox here to opine on the social media minefield. And Joe Martin of Cloud App will be here to chat about video and visuals in marketing. Lots more in store. I want to invite you to have a listen to my other venture, the innovation podcast, The iPod with Garnett Harriman. Lots of fun stuff happening there. Head over to theinnovationpodcast.co to tune in. Okay, Taylor Ryan. We chatted with Taylor back in episode 47 about hacking your marketing. One ingredient in hacking is how you use Google, and Taylor, who's CMO at Valuer in Copenhagen, is an expert on that. So with the latest batch of Google Algo changes, I asked him to join me to make sense of it. I think we made some headway, and there are a bunch of links in the episode notes, so check that out. So without further ado, let's get to it. Taylor, great to have you back here on Confessions of a Marketer.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so there was a major Google algorithm update, I think, in one of the last few days. Can you tell me what changed and how it affects marketers?
Yeah, it's been this wild thing. It actually was two updates at the same time. So one of the updates is this broad algorithm update, and that hit on June 3rd.
Yeah.
And around June 4th through the 6th, they started their kind of first push towards the diversity updates, which, you can't really differentiate the two when they roll out at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there has been a huge uproar in terms of different folks that are really into SEO and trying to figure out what the heck is happening, because it's thrown a lot of people off very quickly. And it's all very hush-hush when you ask the powers that be, Google, to define kind of what's happening here. It's been crazy.
How do you actually get in touch with someone at Google to ask them a question about SEO?
They have a Twitter account where they announce.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So future updates or any type of speculation will often come through that. At times, they had this guy, Matt Cutts, giving his thoughts on kind of these new rollouts, and he was pretty pivotal when he was explaining, what is Hummingbird, what is Penguin, right. And some of these other, like the Fred update, all of these things that required a bit of explanation. And I think now you have the powers that be that are basically saying, we're going to keep more to our chest, because there's a saying that's out there that Gary Vaynerchuk uses quite often, which is marketers ruin everything. So
he would know, definitely, I think.
That's right. So, the idea is Google doesn't want to give people somewhat of the, secret ingredients to the secret sauce, because then it has to start looking at updating all over again. And it's incredibly frustrating to keep up with these things.
Yeah, so why do you think they changed the algorithm in such substantive ways? Is it my sense is that they want to keep people from gaming the system. Is that part of it?
That's exactly right. And there's definitely something to be said for that. If you look back on like the early 2000s, where people were able to rank for individual keywords just by keyword density. So if you copied and pasted the word coffee 1,000 times in the footer of a particular landing page, you would rank for the word coffee.
Right.
And obviously that wasn't incentive based in terms of the way that if you're producing good content or you're giving people something in the way of value, then you should be ranking. But I mean, there will always be people that are trying to game the system, and I'm no different. I try to figure out what I have to do to placate to Google's kind of demands in order to get more traffic.
Yeah. So I've talked about SEO on this podcast a number of times. Never really like deep about SEO, but kind of just around the edges of it. And it seems to me that SEO is, maybe it's not becoming less relevant, but at least almost impossible to keep up with. And I said in a recent podcast that it was dead. What do you think?
I think there's a mixture of art and science. And, of course, there's a difference between on-site and off-site. And the idea is following a relatively rigid set of instructions in terms of this is the way that, let's just say it's for pages, your URL structure needs to make sense in terms of having a good site schema, identifying the H1 title tags, and then the subtitle tags after that. So H2, H3, H4. But it's gotten a lot more complex over the years.
Yeah.
And this EAT update, EAT, and EAT is this thing that Google just kind of threw out there, which is expertise, authoritativeness, which, okay, great, that's a word now, and trust. The concept is you need to come off as a website that is trustworthy enough that you would either send your mother to or you'd be willing to put in your credit card details.
Right.
And that means that the content needs to make sense and needs to adhere to the topic. It also means that the writers that are writing for you can't just be random marketers. It's looking for people that are known within this niche and have written other things. And, this whole idea of trying to combat fake news is part of what they're doing here. And it means that they're also extrapolating if certain websites are ranked inside of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is considered to be one of the more high authority and more trustworthy sites because it is user generated and users police themselves. I think you could probably extrapolate your own intuitive kind of thoughts in terms of like, well, that could go wrong.
Yeah. What could possibly happen wrong with that? Yeah.
Right. But it's crazy. And so like there's been some really interesting things that have come out. So like major winners of like these new sets of updates is like, Huffington Post all of a sudden is now considered to, be another affirmation of like them doing well. You have some of the larger publishers like Harvard Business Review, Business Insider, and some of these well-known publishers that are continuing to rank. And I think that's all well and good, but I don't know if these are necessarily the people that epitomize journalistic integrity.
Right.
You also have losers like the Daily Mail, which has come out in numerous places as reporting something in the way of news that is hearsay or hashtag fake news. They've seen drastic cuts. There's been a website that shut down as a result of this, a website called ccn.com. Yeah, it was a cryptocurrency company that basically speculated on the value and worth of different cryptocurrencies and what was trending. And basically, they've had their traffic completely turned off. Another site, Mercola, Mercola. I had never heard of them, but they were generating upwards of 1.5 to 2 million unique visitors per month.
Wow.
And they claim, like a pretty well-known, I'm sure in some circles, website, they've lost up to 99% of their traffic, which, if your livelihood's attached to that, that's a big deal. And one of the ways that Google has continued to kind of come out and recognize what they're doing is saying, we're trying to focus on industries that will they will affect people in a financial way, in a negative way, based on what they're putting out. So this is banking, military, agriculture, pharma, medical, and sometimes media and big tech. Are you misleading people? Are you giving people an objective perspective? I don't know how you go about exactly measuring all that, but they seem to claim that is what has been tweaked in this recent rollout. And I've certainly seen it on my site. I've seen a drop initially at the beginning of June that was around 10%. And I'm looking at it now, and it's closer to 16, 17 in terms of a drop in organic traffic. And it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. What's interesting, I think, with something like this is, if you look at the history of business, when a company makes a major change, say, for example, Coke changes the ingredient in Coke, the main competitor, Pepsi, can do something in response to that. But here, Google doesn't have a competitor. It's not as though people are saying, well, let's go and concentrate on Bing. they have a monopoly over this.
Right.
Yeah,
and sure, go ahead. Yeah, I know where you're going. I'm with you.
And so what's a marketer to do?
Well, if you go to Maricola, the owner of the website asks people to stop using Google.
Okay. I'll just pack up my laptop and just call it a day, right?
Yeah, that doesn't really seem like a worthwhile venture to be like, no more searching for stuff on the internet. That's not realistic. And, there is no way to really combat this. Of course, if you get something in the way of a manual penalty, which is where one of Google's quality raters, as they call them, goes out, finds your website, and determines that you're misleading or you're selling a nefarious product or you're doing some sketchy things, they can give you a manual penalty, which basically starts the reset button and makes it incredibly difficult for you to continue to rank for stuff for months. And there are ways to reach back out and say, look, this was a spam attack that happened to our website, or somebody hit us with negative SEO. Can you please not go so hard on us? And I've not heard anybody that's really come away from that unscathed. I mean, either way, it's a very long process to build up that authoritative rating again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are scratching their heads and saying, what am I supposed to do now?
So tell me about those quality raters. How many have they hired and what exactly do they do?
It's tough to speculate. There's this EAT update that came out prior to May 16th where they were kind of elaborating that these people are basically employed to go out and directly evaluate based on whatever their comprehension of expertise, authoritativeness, and trust is, and then start to lower or raise the overall ranking of these things in a manual sense from a human standpoint. And that can be quite scary. It comes from a number of acquisitions in Google's, quality rater guidelines. And it's real interesting the more you dig into this. There's a number of great articles out there. If you search just for Google quality raters, you can start to find some of the stuff that's out there. But they've done a number of really interesting acquisitions to try to get a better feel for this, deluge of new sites, new blog posts, new articles that are consistently coming out on a regular basis. How do we apply statistics to this to be able to say with some element of certainty that this was speculation versus this is somebody that's making very broad claims and this is somebody that's just reporting something? When you imagine yourself having to basically play internet police, it gets very slippery very quickly in terms of how one actually takes an ethical approach to it and what they deem to be relevant and worth being served up on a daily basis versus something that nobody should be able to find organically. And that could be very challenging.
Yeah, and we'll have links to all these documents you're referring to and things you're referring to in our show notes. So listeners can kind of dig into it themselves. So what industries do you think are most affected? You've given me some winners and losers, but what industries do you think are most affected?
Yeah, the stuff that I've been seeing that's been effective in an inadvertently good way are people that put out sites that are basically selling hacked versions of software solutions. So this diversity update that came out was basically saying to the world, if you rank for, let's say, I used the phrase coffee before, if you rank for the keyword coffee and you come up in spots 2, 3, and 10, they don't think that you're allowed to have that much influence over a single keyword. So they've stricken you hopefully from the last two and you still rank for number 2. But there's not as much science to all this as I wish there was. And so the idea is they're removing significant pages that I would say a number of domains just kind of own those specific keywords. Their explanation is, I would say, it has holes in it. The idea is they'd like to give more companies or more domains or more people a chance to rank for these really difficult keywords. But in doing so, I think you also have reduced the reach of some of the ones that were ranking for a reason because they're high authority and probably know the most about this area or that area. And that's what's frustrating for us is, we're in a pretty narrow niche. So if you're ranking across long tail for 2 or 3 pages, then it means you really have to change up your content game to make sure that you're not cannibalizing your own keywords and basically only giving the newest article that came out, which might not be that great to capture that specific keyword, and then you end up losing all the traffic you got from a page that was doing really well. So
yeah.
I hope you follow me, but yeah, it's super frustrating.
Yeah, and you're not unique, right? I mean, most companies have a niche that they go after. Most companies are looking for a niche, and the way in which they rank on search results is critical to their business.
Absolutely. And going back to your question, the types of industries that have been affected, Google, in so many words, via a few interviews with a few characters kind of towards the top, are basically explaining that the types of pages that could potentially be impacted, they impact the future of happiness, health, financial stability, or the safety of users. Whatever that means. But that kind of relates to why you see some of these health sites that are their traffic is completely diminished, like this Maricola place. The idea is that they had a number of articles that were talking about holistic alternatives to cancer treatments or holistic alternatives to insulin treatments. And it's like, well, okay, how much truth is in this and how much is it BS?
Sure.
And by the way, you have affiliate links on your site because that's how you make your money. So is this really journalistic integrity, or is this you just trying to get enough people to come to your site so you can convert somebody on, pills that have nothing but shredded newspapers in it that are supposed to cure cancer? So in theory, there's some good there. But I think in practice, you hurt some people that are actually trying to do the right thing. And that's one of the more frustrating parts of seeing this.
Yeah. So what's the fallout from this? And what possibly could Google do next?
I think there's definitely, from the tech perspective, I think that's being felt in a number of startup communities where it's already really hard to start from zero and actually rank. And I think you'll have people that are trying to double down on anything that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
And also try to, at least the pendulum kind of swings back the other way. So at the very least, start going in and doing what they call Google stacking. So the idea is creating links using Google sites that work as kind of these publisher blog networks, or as they call them, PBNs, so that you have lots of little subsites that are based and hosted via Google that are pointing to your main site. That's one avenue that Google's like, hey, all right, well, this is part of our brand. Let's do this. It's the same thing with creating, links on YouTube.
Sure.
YouTube, shocker, it's owned by Google. So anytime that you're linking to a website off of YouTube, there's value there. And also, if you're embedding YouTube videos on your posts, Google says, look, they're covering this topic in a different way and using an additional source or medium to be able to do that. And by the way, more time on Google's platform, YouTube, is more ad revenue for them. So, hey, check the box there. And then, the last one that's relatively new, and I think some of the gray hat folks that are in SEO are starting to play with, is my business listing.
Yeah.
So the idea is that Google has always given people a chance to add some more information on their business listings. But one of the more provocative things that I've seen in recent times is that they give you the chance to basically handle it like it's a social media platform. So you can create posts, you can add photos, you can announce features. And I suggest anybody that has a registered business with an address, and hopefully that's most of the people listening, get into, if you just Google the phrase, Google My Business, you can find your menu there and start going into the post section and see what happens when you add a new image or add an offer or a product. And, I've been playing around with this just over the last couple of weeks. It's very disconcerting because, we added a couple of pictures of some stuff that was happening here at Valuer and, some people in the office. And within a day, you see 100 new views of photos that were somewhat buried. And it's like, who's looking at this? Who's this for?
Right.
So I'm not 100% certain where this stuff is going, but it might be fed into Google News. It might be fed into local searches. The idea is that when folks are searching on their mobiles, it tends to give greater, impressions or greater openness to the folks that are local to you. So your listings on mobile will be very different from desktop, even though you might even be on the Wi-Fi.
Right.
And the last thing is you have a different experience overall if you do a search on your mobile, because you used to get 6 slots where you would see 6 results and 2 ads. Now it's 5. And who knows, in a month, maybe it's only 3 organic results that show up and 2 ads.
Yeah.
It's incredibly frustrating. And the idea is that these guys are in business to make money. And I'm trying to find the right way to work with them. But it's going to be a challenge no matter who you are to continue to try to navigate basically these minefields and figure out what works best for you, because the content game was always something that worked. And I'm looking around right now going, damn, I just lost 15% of my organic traffic. What am I going to do now?
Whatever happened to "Don't be evil"? That was their motto. I guess they changed it a while ago to do the right thing.
Yeah,
but it just seems.
Was it do no evil? Maybe they just omitted the no.
Anyway, this is fascinating to discuss, and I could go on, and maybe let's track this over the summer, and maybe we can chat again in the fall and see what traffic levels look like, and whether they came to their senses over this.
Yeah, I'd love to test out a few things and get back to you. I think there's some really interesting opportunities in terms of some of these posts on the Google My Business page. And I mean, I honestly didn't take it seriously until this new update. And I'm like, okay, so if I were them, what would I want my users to do? So yeah, I'd love to give you feedback towards the end of the summer to be like, this worked, this didn't work, and here's what I found out. I think that could be fun.
Well, until then, enjoy your summer, and thanks for joining me. It's always fun to talk to you, and I always feel enlightened after I have talked with you. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate that.
All right, next time, Victor Machado is in to continue on the Google theme as we chat about SEO versus SEM and a lot more, so stay with us. This episode of Confessions of a Marketer was written, produced, and edited by yours truly. T. Jordan of A-Class Productions wrote the theme music. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2019. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. See you next time.